Hello students, this is Mr. Wilsey, and in this video we're going to look at objective number 4, which is all about mathematical properties. So let's take a look at the quiz that you guys took. Now, in objective number 4 you got proficient 80% of the points possible if you were able to apply the commutative, associative, and distributive properties to rewrite expressions. That was in these two problems here. And then you got advanced, or 100% of the possible points, if you were able to identify which property was used to justify each step in a solution process. And that and it was determined whether or not you were advanced if you could fill out this problem correctly. So let's go ahead and look at 4.1 together. 4.1 asks us to simplify this algebraic expression. 9 times, in parentheses, 2x minus 3 plus, in parentheses, 4 minus x times 3. Okay. Now to simplify this expression, we need to apply the distributive property. Distributive property. We need to apply it twice, actually. The distributive property says that we can take this 9 and we can bring it in, multiply it by the 2x, and also multiply it by the negative 3. So 9 times 2x plus 9 times negative 3. Now, we distributed by bringing the 9 in from the front. We can also bring in the 3 from the back side. Okay, so it doesn't matter in which direction we go. So plus 4 times 3 minus x times 3. Okay. Now, notice that we are allowed to use the distributive property only when there's a plus or minus sign between the things inside the parentheses. Okay? So, now that we've applied the distributive property, let us apply the, let's see, we can apply the associative property. So from here to here was the distributive property. Associative property. The associative property will allow us to go to the next step. Associative property of multiplication. Because we can say that 9 times 2x is the same thing as 9 times 2 times x plus everything else. Okay? Let's say dot dot dot. So all of the rest of that stuff. And then the next step after that, now you don't have to do each and every one of these steps. You don't have to write them all out. But since this objective is all about mathematical properties, I might as well show you how the properties fit into the typical simplification process. So the next process is, or the next property that we can use is substitution. That just means that you can replace something like 9 times 2 with something that 9 times 2 is equal to. So 9 times 2 is equal to 18. So 18x plus 9 times negative 3 is equal to negative 27. So we can replace 9 times negative 3 with negative 27. We can use substitution. We can substitute negative 27 for 9 times negative 3. We can substitute 12 for 4 times 3, and we can't really simplify that any. X times 3. Now, let us use the commutative property of multiplication to flip this around. Negative 3 times x. Okay? Dot, dot, dot. Now, let's see. What's the next step going to be? 18x minus 27 plus 12 minus 3x. Okay. Now, I am getting lazy, and I really don't want to keep on identifying which property allows us to do each step. So I think from here you can pretty much see that we have an 18x, we have a negative 3x. We can combine those two. 18x minus 3x is 15x, and then negative 27 plus 12 is minus, is that 15? I don't know, let's see. Negative 27 plus 12 is the same thing as using the reverse distributive property, negative 27 minus 12. You see how I got that? So I can do 27 minus 12. 7 minus 2, 5, 1. Yep, so that's 15. With the negative out front, so it's negative 15. Anyway, so what I just did over here was quick calculation and make sure that I did that correct. So 15x minus 15 is the answer that I wanted. Now that's, as long as you found a way to get 15x minus 15, that's all you needed to do for problem 4.1. Like I said, you did not need to actually identify which property was used to justify each step in the simplification process. Now, since I've got the quiz here, let's go ahead and look at 4.2. Asks us to simplify 2x minus 16 all divided by 4. Now, again, we need to use the distributive property. The distributive property as it's applied to this problem looks a little bit different, okay? Because instead of having a set of parentheses that is being multiplied by something, we have, basically this is what we have. We have 2x minus 16 in parentheses, because it's grouped together, divided by 4. That's basically what we have. And the distributive property allows us to say 2x divided by 4 minus 16 divided by 4. Okay? So now that should look more like the distributive property that you're used to. Another way to visualize this is just breaking up the fraction into two pieces with the 4 in the denominator of both pieces. So 2x over 4 minus 16 over 4. Okay? Two different ways to talk about the same exact problem. Over here, we can simplify this. 2 over 4 is the same thing as 1 over 2. So 1x over 2 minus 16 over 4 is just 4. Now, that 1 there can disappear, because 1 times x is the same thing as just x. So this is the way I would prefer you to write your final answer for problem 4.2, x over 2 minus 4. Now, let's take a look at 4.3. Now, in this case, we are given a couple of steps in the simplification process, and we are asked to identify which mathematical property was used to justify each step. Now, remember, your only options for all of the problems like this that I give you in class are, let me not write it here on this page, let me write it over here. Here's your options. The commutative property of addition or multiplication. remember their subtraction and division are not commutative. So there is no such thing as a commutative property of subtraction or of division. We also have the associative property of addition or multiplication. Now remember, commutative means order doesn't matter. So 7 times 3 is the same thing as 3 times 7. Or 7 plus 3 is the same thing as 3 plus 7. Associative property says that the grouping doesn't matter. So 3 plus 8 plus 9 is the same thing as 3 plus, well, yeah, you'll see some examples of that in a second. So commutative property, associative property, distributive property, probably the most important property because it is the most useful, distributive property, and then substitution is the last one. So you really only have 5 possible phrases that you could write in these slots here. So let's take a look. So we are given that expression right there, and then we go from that step to that step, and we are asked which property did we use to go from that to that. Well, let's see what we did. It looks like we took the 4 and brought it in so that it's multiplying the 2x and the 5 separately. And it also looks like we broke up the fraction bar right here, and we attached the 3 to the 9x and to the 12 separately. Now both of those are examples of applying the distributive property. We just got finished talking about that, distributive property. Now let's see what property we use to go from that step to that step. Well, the only thing different is right here. Up here we have 4 times 2x. Over here we have 4 times 2 times x. Now this is an example of where the grouping doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you do 2x first, 2 times x first, and then multiply by 4, or if you multiply 4 times 2 and then multiply the x. So the grouping doesn't matter. And in this particular case, we use the associative property of multiplication. Now let's look at the next step together. How do we go from that step to that step? Well, it looks like we replaced 4 times 2 with 8, 4 times 5 with 20, 9 over 3 with 3, and negative 12 over 3 with negative 4. So we made 4 replacements there. Remember, a synonym for replace is substitute. So we use the substitution property. Substitution property. Now, to go from here to here, what did we do? Well, it looks like the only thing different is that the 20 and the 3x flipped places. So essentially, we just flipped the 20 and the 3x over a plus sign. That's a way of saying that the order doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you start with 20 and add 3x, or start with 3x and add 20. It doesn't matter. That is an example of the commutative property of addition, because we are commuting over a plus sign. Addition. Now let's see. E is kind of a tough one. Here, the only thing that's different is that the x's get taken out of this set of parentheses. This is an example of the distributive property, except in reverse. Distributive property. You see that? If we started with this line and went to that line, it's obvious that we would have used the distributive property. So if we start here and go here, we just use the distributive property in reverse. And then finally, to go from this line to this line, it looks like we substituted 11 for 8 plus 3, and we substituted 16 for 20 minus 4. So substitution is the final step. Substitution. Wow, it must be late if I can't even spell that word. Okay, so let me give you a few problems to work on your own, and then remember, in order for you to retake this objective, you need to bring in your work to these problems. You try number 1. Okay, the directions are apply the distributive property. You try number 1 and 2. Apply the distributive property to simplify the following expressions. Number 1 is this, 42w plus 14. I hope you can read that. Looks like the camera on my iPad is getting blurrier. The focus gets blurrier as time goes on, as I'm recording. So 42w plus 14, all divided by 7, minus 6 times 3w plus 4. That's number 1. Simplify that guy for me. And then number 2 is 2t plus 3 times 11. Okay, and then you try numbers 3, 4, and 5. They look like this. Identify the property that justifies each equation. I'll explain a little bit more what that means. So, in parentheses, 7 plus 3 plus 5. Why, what property allows us to say that this is equal to 7 plus, in parentheses, 3 plus 5? Tell me that. This is number 3. Number 4, tell me what property allows me to say that 2 times, in parentheses, 9 plus 8 is the same thing as, in parentheses, 9 plus 8 times 2. What property allows me to say that? And then finally, what property allows me to say that 2 times 9 plus 8, in parentheses, is equal to 2 times 9 plus 2 times 8? Okay, what property allows me to say that? And then why not just add this in? What property allows me to say that this is the same thing as 18 plus 16? Okay, that is your homework in order to retake this objective. Okay, good luck.